The first warning went out on a Tuesday morning, printed on plain white paper and slid neatly into the HOA's metal drop box like it didn't carry the weight of what was coming. I remember because the air smelled like pine and cold ash, the kind you only notice when winter has barely loosened its grip. I'd been standing in my driveway, staring at the row of homes backing up to the greenbelt, watching smoke drift lazily from backyard fire pits that sat way too close to dry brush for comfort. The neighborhood had rules for everything: grass height, paint shades, where trash cans could sit. But somehow, basic fire safety had become optional. That letter wasn't emotional. It wasn't angry. It was professional. I listed dates. I attached photos. I cited specific code violations the HOA had ignored for months: blocked fire lanes, illegal backyard burn barrels, untrimmed dead trees leaning toward wooden decks, propane tanks stored under staircases. I even highlighted the lot numbers. I signed it with my full name. By Friday, the response came. Not a call. Not a discussion. A violation notice taped to my front door. Harassment of the board. Unapproved interference in HOA matters. Fine attached. At the next meeting, she made sure everyone knew who the problem was. She sat at the head of the folding table like a queen holding court, perfectly styled hair, clipboard clutched to her chest. When my name came up, she didn't look at me. She looked at the room. Some residents think they know better than the board, she said, lips curling into a thin smile. But fear-mongering won't be tolerated here. A few people laughed nervously. Most avoided eye contact. No one backed me up. I stood anyway. I'm not fear-mongering, I said. I'm warning you. If something happens, this neighborhood is not prepared. She finally looked at me then, eyes sharp, annoyed. Mind your own property, she said. That's your only responsibility. The vote passed. My fine doubled. Over the next few weeks, nothing changed except the weather. Dry winds picked up. The brush browned. The evenings grew quieter, settling into that eerie stillness that comes before something breaks. I stopped going to meetings. I documented everything instead: photos, dates, copies of emails that went unanswered. The original warning letter, stamped and signed. I didn't want to be right. But I needed to be ready. The night it happened, I was asleep when the sirens cut through the dark. Not distant. Close. I stepped onto my porch and saw the sky glowing orange over the treeline. Flames licked up behind the houses near the greenbelt, fed by months of neglect and one careless spark. Smoke rolled low and thick, choking the street. Neighbors ran barefoot into the road. Someone was screaming. Another person stood frozen, clutching a phone that wasn't dialing fast enough. Then I heard her voice. I panicked. Unrecognizable. Her house, the one with the stacked firewood under the deck, the one I'd photographed twice, was burning fast. Fire climbed the siding like it had been waiting for permission. She saw me across the street. For a split second, relief crossed her face. Then recognition hit. You, she screamed, coughing, ash in her hair. You knew. You knew this would happen. Firefighters pushed past us, barking orders, dragging hoses that cut deep grooves into the asphalt. The heat was unreal, pressing against my skin like an open oven. I warned you, I said quietly. She didn't hear, or maybe she did, and that made it worse. As flames tore through her roof and the night filled with sirens and shouting, one truth settled heavy in my chest. This wasn't an accident. It was a consequence. And by morning, everyone in the neighborhood would understand exactly what happens when warnings are ignored. Especially when the proof has been sitting in writing the whole time. The sound that woke me wasn't the phone. It was the sirens. At first, I thought I was dreaming, one of those anxious half-sleep moments where your brain replays worst-case scenarios. But then the red light flashed through my bedroom window, pulsing against the ceiling, and I knew. I grabbed my coat and ran outside barefoot. 3 houses down, Linda's place was glowing orange. Not lit, burning. Flames rolled out of the side of the house where I'd first seen the scorch marks weeks earlier. Smoke poured into the sky in thick, choking waves. Neighbors stood frozen on their lawns, phones raised, some crying, some whispering. The heat hit me even from across the street. Fire trucks screamed in, one after another. Firefighters moved fast and practiced, shouting over the roar. Someone dragged a hose across the snowless pavement, sparks hissing where embers landed. And then I heard her. Linda. She was standing barefoot in the street, wrapped in a blanket someone had thrown around her shoulders. Her hair was wild, eyes locked on the flames like she couldn't believe they were real. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she kept saying. "This wasn't supposed to happen." Then she saw me. Her face changed instantly. Anger didn't come first. Fear did. "You," she shouted, pointing. "You knew about this." Every head turned. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there while the fire chewed through her roof and collapsed inward with a sound like thunder. "I warned you," she screamed. "You should have done something." A firefighter stepped between us, firm but calm. "Ma'am, you need to step back." She fought him. "He knew. He sent letters. He's the reason this happened." That's when it hit me, the shift. In her mind, the responsibility had already transferred. The HOA had vanished. The fines, the meetings, the dismissals, all erased. The only thing left was the warning she'd ignored. And the person who gave it. The fire marshal arrived just before dawn. By then, the house was a blackened shell, smoke curling out of broken windows. He moved methodically, taking notes, photographing the exterior, asking questions. When he reached me, he asked quietly, "You the one who reported concerns before this?" I nodded and handed him a printed folder I'd grabbed on my way out the door. He flipped through it slowly. Photos, date, emails, certified mail receipts. His jaw tightened. "This would have helped," he said. Across the street, the HOA president had arrived, still in pajamas under his coat. He hovered nervously, trying to insert himself into conversations, nodding like he belonged there. The fire marshal turned to him. "Did the board receive prior notice of an electrical hazard at this property?" The president stammered. We determined it wasn't actionable." The marshal closed the folder. "You determined wrong." By mid-morning, the story had spread. News vans showed up. Reporters asked questions. Neighbors whispered. Phones buzzed non-stop. And then the HOA email went out. Subject: Emergency Community Update. It was 3 paragraphs of damage control. Thoughts and prayers. Cooperation with authorities. No acknowledgement of warnings. No responsibility. Just one line buried at the end. Residents are reminded not to speculate or assign blame during an active investigation. Linda didn't care. She showed up at my door that afternoon, eyes red, voice shaking with rage and grief. "This is your fault," she said. "If you hadn't harassed the board." I held the doorframe and kept my voice level. "I warned you," I said. "Multiple times. In writing." She laughed, sharp and broken. "You wanted this. You wanted to be right." I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "I wanted you to listen." She left screaming. That night, I received a notice from the HOA's legal counsel. A cease and desist. They accused me of defamation, of interfering with board operations, of causing emotional distress to a member. I forwarded it to the fire marshal. 2 days later, inspectors returned with warrants. They didn't stop at Linda's lot. They went house to house. Unsafe wiring. Illegal modifications. Deferred maintenance the HOA had ignored for years. Fines were issued, not to residents but to the association itself. The board called an emergency meeting. This time, the room was silent. No laughter. No smirks. Just the smell of smoke still lingering in the air, and the understanding that ignoring a warning doesn't make it disappear. It just waits, and when it comes back, it brings fire with it. By the end of the week, the HOA neighborhood didn't feel like the same place anymore. The fire had burned down more than one house. It had burned down the illusion of control the board had relied on for years. The quiet confidence they once carried was gone, replaced with nervous smiles and closed-door meetings that lasted late into the night. Inspectors were everywhere. City trucks lined the streets. Clipboards, hard hats, measuring tape. They checked electrical panels, crawl spaces, attics, places the HOA had ignored for a decade while obsessing over lawn height and paint shade. And every time they found something wrong, they wrote it down. Neighbors started stopping me on my walk. Not to accuse me. To thank me. I saw those scorch marks months ago, one man admitted quietly. I just didn't want to deal with the board. Another woman whispered, they fined me for reporting a gas smell last year. I never said anything again. Fear had kept everyone silent. Until the fire. The HOA tried to regain control the only way they knew how, paper. Another letter arrived in my mailbox, this one stamped urgent. It claimed the association was being unfairly targeted because of false prior complaints and warned residents not to cooperate with inspectors without board approval. That letter backfired immediately. The city issued a public notice the same day stating that interference with safety inspections could result in criminal charges. The HOA president resigned that night. The vice president followed 2 days later. Linda's situation grew worse by the hour. Insurance investigators confirmed what the fire marshal already suspected. The blaze started exactly where I'd warned it would. Faulty wiring. Overloaded extension cord. Years of neglect. Her claim was denied. When she found out, she screamed in the street again, but this time, no one joined her. She filed a civil complaint against the HOA, accusing them of negligence and suppression of safety concerns. Her lawyer subpoenaed board emails, meeting minutes, and internal correspondence. What came out was damning. They had discussed my warnings in private, laughed about them. One email from a board member read, "If we respond to him, we set a precedent. Better to fine him until he stops." That email circulated fast. The news stations picked it up, then online outlet, then local radio. The HOA's name became synonymous with arrogance and neglect. And me? They stopped sending me letters. Instead, their attorney reached out, politely this time, asking if I would provide a statement confirming I'd acted in good faith. I did. I stuck to facts, date, documents, nothing emotional, nothing exaggerated. Truth was enough. The emergency HOA meeting that followed was nothing like the others. No gavel banging, no smug smiles. Just folding chairs, murmurs, and people finally asking the questions they'd been too afraid to ask before. How many warnings were ignored? Who approved those fines? Why were safety complaints treated like violations? No one had good answers. A temporary board was formed under city supervision. Independent inspectors were hired. Mandatory safety audits were scheduled for every home. Dues went up. Special assessments followed. People were angry, but not at me. They were angry at the people who'd punished the messenger while the house burned down behind them. Linda moved out within a month. I saw her once, loading boxes into a rented truck. She didn't yell this time. She didn't even look at me. She looked tired, defeated. The last thing she said, barely above a whisper, was, "I should have listened." I didn't reply. Some lessons arrived too late for words. Weeks later, I walked past her empty lot. The blackened frame had been cleared, leaving nothing but a patch of dirt and a warning sign from the city. Unsafe structure, do not enter. It struck me then how small the warning had been at the start. Just a melted box, a warm cord, a smell in the air, something easy to ignore. The HOA thought power meant silence. They thought fines could replace responsibility. But fire doesn't care about authority. It only cares about fuel, and arrogance burns hottest of all. The neighborhood is quieter now. Safer too. And every time I see a new inspection notice taped to a door, I'm reminded of one simple truth the HOA learned the hard way. Ignoring a warning doesn't make it go away. It just makes the consequences louder. The HOA thought the worst was over once the inspectors left. They were wrong. What the fire started, the paperwork finished. A month after the blaze, the city released its final report. It was 43 pages long, stamped, signed, and devastating. It concluded that the fire was preventable, that prior warnings had been clearly documented, and that the HOA's actions constituted systemic negligence. That phrase, systemic negligence, changed everything. The city didn't just fine the association. They placed it under oversight. The HOA's authority to issue fines, approve modifications, or enforce rules was suspended pending restructuring. For the first time since the neighborhood was built, the board no longer had power. You could feel the shift immediately. No more violation notices tucked under windshield wipers. No more threatening letters for trash bins left out too long. No more selective enforcement used as punishment. People breathed again. Then the lawsuits started. Linda's case moved forward quickly once discovery exposed the internal emails. Other residents joined in, homeowners who had reported gas leaks, faulty wiring, water damage, and structural cracks, only to be fined or ignored. It became a class action. The HOA's insurance refused to cover it, citing gross misconduct. Dues skyrocketed overnight to fund the legal defense. Then special assessments hit, 5 figures per household. Panic set in. At an emergency town hall, residents packed the room shoulder to shoulder. The temporary board sat at the front, pale and overwhelmed. A city representative stood beside them, arms crossed. One by one, people stood up. Why were safety complaints punished? Why were inspectors blocked? Why did you ignore written warnings? No one defended the old board anymore. Someone finally asked the question hanging in the air. Why didn't we listen to him? All eyes turned to me. I hadn't planned to speak. But I stood anyway. I didn't want to be right, I said. I wanted to be safe. And I didn't have power, I had paperwork. Silence followed. Then applause. Not loud. Not dramatic. Real. Within weeks, the HOA settled. The terms were brutal. Millions in damages. Mandatory third-party management. Annual safety audits overseen by the city. The original board members were personally named. Some lost their homes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The rules they'd enforced so eagerly finally applied to them. Linda never came back. Her lot sold at a loss. The new owners rebuilt. Carefully, with permits, inspections, and transparency at every step. Sometimes I watched from my porch as contractors worked. New wiring, new breakers, new safeguards, all things that could have been done before the fire. One evening, months later, I received a letter, not from the HOA but from the city. It thanked me for my diligence and persistence, and confirmed I would not be held liable for any civil claims. Attached was a note from the fire marshal. You did everything right. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I folded it and put it away. Life slowly returned to normal. Kids played outside again. Neighbors talked instead of whispering. Inspection notices were no longer feared, they were welcomed. The new HOA, stripped of ego and excess power, focused on one thing: safety. Exactly what it should have been from the start. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear sirens in my head. Still see the flames reflected in Linda's eyes. Still remember the way blame tried to rewrite history. But the truth held. Warnings matter. Documentation matters. And power without responsibility is just fuel waiting for a spark. The HOA learned that lesson the hard way. The neighborhood paid the price. But in the end, the silence broke, the system reset, and the fire, terrible as it was, forced accountability where fear once lived. And that's the part they never expected. Ignoring a warning doesn't just destroy homes. It exposes everyone who chose comfort over responsibility. And once exposed, there's no fine big enough to make that go away.